Annelise, Australia last week cancelled its $90 billion submarine deal with France and signed up to a new security deal with the US and Britain that will have them helping us build nuclear subs, better subs instead. Now, France is demanding the European Union help punish us for our effrontery in wanting better protection, and the European Commission President says she's actually looking at doing that kind of idiotic thing. Here she is.
One of our member states has been treated in a way that is not acceptable. So we want to know what happened and why, and therefore you first of all clarify that before you keep on going with business as usual.
Well, Scott Morrison landed today in New York to start talks with President Joe Biden. How worried did he seem by all these threats going around?
It's a bit like watching a bad breakup play out, isn't it? Because there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of hurt feelings, drama, people trying to pull other people into everything. But at the end of the day, Scott Morrison seems pretty in lockstep with the US government in that they expected that there would be this kind of backlash, and they're not all too fazed about it because they think that they made the right call. And the real test of this is going to be how the UK acts. They're a much closer strategic alliance to France geopolitically, just by sheer virtue of their location. They're much more in France's face, and they're pushing on with this too. We're looking at potentially having British nuclear submarines coming through Australian waters and increased participation between our two defence forces there. But both sides were just saying, look, we want to continue talking to France, we want to continue our relationship, and we want them participating in the Indo-Pacific. But, I mean, France does have a history of this. They withdrew their ambassador from Australia before in 1995 because we protested them doing nuclear testing in the Pacific. And so it's not entirely unexpected in this context. And they're facing down an election as well. So I think there'll be some element of waiting to see who exactly is president in a few months before we start making big long-term calls about our alliances.
That's true too. I think you're absolutely right. Got to see it in the context of the French election. Has got the hot breath of the far right, Marine Le Pen, down his neck. So he's, of course, is beating his chest and all that. But anyway, here is Scott Morrison today, sort of blowing off the French.
It would be naive to think that a decision of this nature was not going to cause disappointment, obviously, to the French. We understand that. We totally acknowledge that. And we knew that that would be the case. And it was not possible for us to be able to discuss such secure issues in relation to our dealings with other countries at that time.
To be honest, I'd have more faith in the British turning up with their submarines to help us than the French ever would. But there you go. That's just me. What does Scott Morrison want from President Joe Biden on this visit? I mean, what are they going to discuss that we didn't hear last week about this new security deal?
Well, I think this trip's going to be more about what Joe Biden wants from Australia. And I think that was the initial question that when this was announced, many were saying, well, what's the reciprocity that's being asked of us here? I think it's pretty notable that for the bilateral at the UN, they're bringing their special climate envoy, John Kerry, so we can expect a little pressure on that front. But this is also the start of 18 months in negotiation. This is not a deal that's been fleshed out in detail. This is something that they've agreed in principle to the fact that they will share this technology, but we don't have a cost yet. We don't have a delivery timeline. All of that has to be negotiated. And that's something that the American media has been asking a lot of the White House. Is this a done deal? The White House says yes, emphatically, but there are conditions on it, including just the handling of that nuclear material, all of that, whether it complies with the international regulations, whether we can do it within those norms put out by the international agencies that manage that. But the White House has said repeatedly that they're confident that Australia is a good player in that space, that we're responsible, that we will adhere to that and then some. So they're talking down any kind of idea that there would be any issues with this rollout. But I think everyone wants to know when are we going to get this nuclear submarine in the water and what's going to happen in the meantime for Australia to keep us protected, because we've made a pretty big call here, putting us so strategically in line with the United States. You can bet China's watching. It's not just going to be the reaction from France that everyone's talking about in the years to come.
Yeah, well, I hope China is watching. But it scares me when you say that Lurch is going to be in these rooms. John Kerry, I mean, is there a more hopeless man who's been so wrong on so many things with his climate change agenda? I mean, I just hope that Scott Morrison hasn't bought a sub in exchange for caving in on global warming, but I suspect he may have. Annelise Nielsen, thank you so much for your time.